Welcome. I'm Erik Fleming, host of A Moment with Erik Fleming, the podcast of our time. I want to personally thank you for listening to the podcast. If you like what you're hearing, then I need you to do a few things. First, I need subscribers. I'm on Patreon at patreon.com/A Moment with Erik Fleming. Your subscription allows an independent podcaster like me the freedom to speak truth to power and to expand and improve the show. Second, leave a 5-star review for the podcast on the streaming service you listen to it. That will help the podcast tremendously. Third, go to the website, momenterik.com. There you can subscribe to the podcast, leave reviews and comments, listen to past episodes, and even learn a little bit about your host. Lastly, don't keep this a secret like it's your own personal guilty pleasure. Tell someone else about the podcast. Encourage others to listen to the podcast and share the podcast on your social media platforms because it is time to make this moment a movement. Thanks in advance for supporting the podcast of our time. I hope you enjoy this episode as well.
The following program is hosted by the NVG Podcast Network.
Hello, and welcome to another Moment with Erik Fleming. I am your host, Erik Fleming. So today, I have two guests. One is going to talk about her personal journey, and it's fitting that her story is dropping in this episode because the day that this episode drops will be her birthday. So happy birthday to my guest. And then my other guest is one of the more renowned writers from Mississippi. And we're going to talk about his latest book, which really touches on a part of the state that a lot of people know the truth, but there's still some mythology behind it. And he breaks it down pretty good. And I think you'll enjoy our discussion. I think you'll enjoy the book better, but you'll definitely enjoy the discussion. Anyway, I'm just really glad to have y'all listen and hope you enjoy those interviews. And if you do, show your support, not just by listening, but go to www.momenterik.com. That's www.momenterik.com. And show your support either by subscriptions, writing a review, giving a 5-star rating, all that good stuff, right? If you want to catch up on some stuff, you can basically catch up to every episode that I've put out there through the website. So I appreciate if y'all do that. All right, let's go ahead and kick this program off. As always, we kick it off with a moment of news with Grace G.
Thanks, Erik. The House rejected a Senate funding agreement for most Department of Homeland Security components, including the TSA and Coast Guard, while leaving ICE and Border Patrol out of the deal for future negotiation. The Senate confirmed Republican Senator Mark Wayne Mullen as the new head of the Department of Homeland Security. President Trump signed an executive order requiring federal contractors to eliminate diversity, equity, and inclusion practices. The U.S. Department of Justice is moving to drop criminal charges against 2 former Louisville officers accused of falsifying the search warrant in the Breonna Taylor case. The state of Minnesota filed a lawsuit against the Department of Justice and Department of Homeland Security to gain access to evidence regarding the fatal shootings of Renee Good and Alex Preddy. An Air Canada Express jet collision with a fire truck at LaGuardia Airport resulted in the deaths of both pilots and numerous injuries. A federal judge has halted a restrictive Pentagon policy that would have allowed the government to label journalists as security risks. Alexia Moore, a 31-year-old Georgia woman, has been charged with murder after taking abortion medication that led to the death of a premature infant. A California jury ordered Bill Cosby to pay nearly $20 million in damages to Donna Motzinger after finding him liable for a sexual assault that occurred in 1972. A Florida Democrat, Emily Gregory, successfully flipped a Republican state house seat near President Trump's Mar-a-Lago resort. A Los Angeles jury found Google and Meta liable for social media addiction. A New Mexico jury ordered Meta to pay $375 million in penalties after finding the company violated state consumer protection laws. And former FBI Director Robert Mueller died at the age of 81. I am Grace G., and this has been a Moment of News.
All right. Thank you, Grace, for that moment of news. And now it's time for my next guest, Leatrice De Bruhl. Speaker, life and grief coach, storyteller, expert, mental health professional, CEO and founder of Phenomenal Black Women, LLC. From trauma to testimony, Leatrice De Bruhl turned pain into purpose after surviving abuse, injustice, mental health battles, and the heartbreaking loss of her only child to suicide. Now she speaks to heal, uplift, and help others rise. She walks alongside other women who feel alone and suffer in silence. Leatrice has experienced the fires, yet her flame is still lit. Life has been both her experience and years of expertise. Although on paper she possesses 2 degrees, one being a master's degree in psychology. Leatrice has over 20 years of law enforcement experience and years working as a mental health professional. Her greatest accomplishment was being a single mother who raised her son alone. Grace to Grieve, keeping faith, is her focus to conquer any adversity, turning pain into purpose to motivate women to continue their journey, live and love to lead their legacy. Leatrice offers hope in the hearts of women, tools in their hands, and the courage to move from brokenness to breakthrough. She empowers them to face adversity with courage, embrace grace in their grief, and take actionable steps toward emotional and spiritual healing. Through her story of loss, trauma, and redemption, the audience will learn that pain doesn't have a final word, and they can find grace and strength to rise again. Ladies and gentlemen, it is my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, Leatrice De Bruhl. All right, Leatrice De Bruhl, how you doing, sister? You doing good?
I'm doing fantastic now.
Well, so am I. Thank you so much for doing this. All right, so when I do these interviews, I start off with a couple of icebreakers. So the first icebreaker is a quote I want you to respond to. And the quote is, I will walk by faith even when I cannot see.
Absolutely. I will walk by faith even when I cannot see. And that's exactly what my life is about.
Okay. All right. All right. So now the next one is what I call 20 questions. So I need you to give me a number between 1 and 20.
12.
All right. What advice do you have for recognizing fake news?
For me, it's like when people critique a movie that just came out and they want to give their own input before you see it for yourself. I always see it for myself if it's something of interest to me instead of listening to the hype. So I treat fake news the same way. If I don't find the truth on my own, I don't focus on it.
Okay. All right. Your friend, Dr. Marianne Rivera Dannert, said, every woman has a story, one shaped by pain, transformed by courage, and reborn through wisdom. So let's talk about your story. What was your life like before 2015?
It was really awesome. I felt like I was living the dream of being a U.S. federal agent, and Black female came up the ranks. Well, not really came up the ranks, but I was in law enforcement prior to that locally before I became a federal agent. And my son was here. Now, I will say I was married, but that really wasn't the highlight. But I was traveling around, seeing the world just like I always dreamed of doing. I just felt like things were great.
So are you from the DMV originally, or you just...
I sure am.
So you were born and
raised in Washington, D.C., Northeast proper.
Okay. All right. So from 2015 to 2025, your life dramatically changed. You lost your career, your freedom, and your beloved son, Malik. How did you find the strength to re-image that shattered period in your life into what we call a beautiful present?
I am living by the scripture, walking by faith. And when I walk by faith, I have to see things for what they are right now because of so much that has gone on in my life. So that living by faith in the present day is all I can do for now. But in a sense, I have a line of sight, as I like to say, for the heavenly kingdom to see my son again. And that's what I work towards with my keeping his legacy going, taking care of his daughters, my granddaughters, anything that I can do within my business of Phenomenal Black Women to help other women as they grieve, giving back to the community however I can. All that encompasses my present day of just still serving as I should, living by faith, and praying for good things to come before I meet my maker.
All right. So tell the listeners a little bit about Malik.
He is he is considered my second heartbeat. I've always said that. I was not supposed to have kids. Malik came around after something traumatic had happened to me at a young age. And Malik came around out of nowhere, and I felt like it was God sent. So I treated him like God sent ever since he was born. And he became a second heartbeat to me because he made me live again. He gave me a reason to live again. And I raised him by myself. Through everything that I've gone through, Malik was my focal point. You know, if I had a bad day at work, I knew I could come home and my son would make me laugh. If my son had a bad day at school, he'd come home, talk about it with me, and we both make each other laugh. And that was the highlight of my life because he knew what I went through to raise him. He knew what I went through just to be a Black woman. And he just knew so much of what I struggled with without having his father around. He knew. And even as my child, he was just always my supporter, my biggest fan, my second heartbeat, my reason for life. When I was down, I looked at my son and I wanted and I wanted the best of the situation, but I looked at my son and like it doesn't matter because I got my son. He was full of laughter. He, like I said, he knew when to make light of a situation. And even at his funeral, so many people showed up saying the exact same thing about my son. He was fun-loving, high-spirited, and just always willing to support and give help to somebody in need. And that's the way I raised him. And to hear that from other people, it really put a smile on my heart. So by him not being physically here anymore, that continues to be my way of saying, but I remember who he is, and that stays in me. And I think that's even better than him being, for me to move forward physically here, like he stays with me all the time. His spirit, it's like a second breath as well as a second heartbeat. It stays with me. So he's still here, but he literally is the light of my life. But now I have a double dose of him with his two daughters, and they are my light right now. And they do definitely have every aspect of my son. And it that keeps me going as well.
Yeah, that's beautiful. During this re-imaging period, you started the Grace to Grieve movement. Explain to the listeners the concept of that.
Grace to Grieve. I'm a certified grief coach. I actually have a background in psychology with a master's degree in psychology as well. And I'm a big advocate of therapy, but I'm also a teacher at heart, a coach at heart, a mentor at heart, an advocate at heart. And for me, I think it's better for me to reach people as an advocate, as a mentor, as a coach, someone to hold them accountable, let them know I have been there with you, but I'm not just holding you accountable, I'm walking with you because I know what you're going through. I'm very familiar with what you're going through. And I want you to see the value in this life. I want you to see the value in yourself. I want you to see the value in your faith. And the only way to do that, in my mind, in my conversations with God, is to show these women that grief is not the end of our story. And healing is not necessarily the beginning. Healing is the process. But our beginning starts with us moving forward. Our beginning starts with us being able to get up out that bed, out that dark room, out those dark thoughts. And as a grief coach and a mentor, someone who you can talk to about anything, I represent that woman. It doesn't even matter if they're Black, white, Hispanic. It doesn't matter your background. We all go through a lot. But in particular, women of color, to speak of myself, I've lived a life so many years of suffering in silence. And with the various cultures of women out there, we all suffer in silence because we want people to see the best parts of us. So Grace to Grieve allows me to help the women to see their value, see how they can move forward, see how it has been done for me, see how God has blessed me from one tragedy to another, from one traumatic situation to another, to one redemptive story and testimony to another, because that's basically what all that was. And I want them to see that for themselves. I want to point them to God. I want them to think that if it wasn't for God, they would not be where they are right now. And they still have a way to connect with God, to live the rest of their life here with whatever is going on. And in a sense, it's kind of weird to say this, but I actually heard someone say this before, but in a different way. I'm actually thankful for the tests, the many tests that I've been through, because without those tests and without my faith, I would not have a testimony to prove that was evidence that God was there the entire time. So no matter who you are, where you are in life, as a woman, yes, it is harder on us. As a Black woman, it is harder on us. Mixed, it is harder on us. Because all people do is see what they see. But what's deep down inside it needs to overshadow that. And I feel like God has given me that living testimony to show people domestic violence, check. He can help you through that. He can walk you out of that. Sexual assault, a victim of rape, check. He can walk you through that. He can get you out of that. Being incarcerated when you shouldn't have been, he can get you out of that. He can walk you through it in any aspect of your life. So I'm actually thankful for all the tests. Even more grateful I continue to trust and have faith, but that he's using that in me to help so many others that I hope that I can help.
Yeah, when I hear a title like Grace to Grieve, that's almost like you giving yourself permission to do that. And I think a lot of people feel that they feel guilty about a natural emotion. And I think it's very important that, in our faith, we talk about getting grace from God, but a lot of times we have to give grace to ourselves and we feel that we can't do that. So I appreciate the concept and what you're trying to do.
That was spot on, Eric. That is exactly it. And sometimes I just get to talking, but that was spot on. Thank you so much. That is exactly what most of the movement is about. Giving yourself the grace. Yes.
All right. Well, I'm glad I could help. Thank you. Uh, what is a phenomenal Black woman?
So, phenomenal Black woman, and actually, it's not a race. Is just for those listeners. It's actually spelled in an acronym form of BLAQUE, and it's representative of a woman blessed like a queen in every way. So that's what Black stands for. So, and with the grief movement, with my speaking, motivational speaking, with my being a mentor, all of that encompasses you being a phenomenal woman yourself. So I'm embracing every woman to be phenomenal. I'm embracing every woman to be the queen that they are, and to show that, they can get through this no matter what we go through. We got to have God on the focal point, and giving yourself that grace, moving forward. If you need me to come talk to you, talk to your church, talk to a group or a woman's group, a book group. I'm an author. Like I've gotten so much to the point where it's like, this is phenomenal to get through all of this. So that name just came to me, but that's really who it's for. It's for every woman that feels like they're not phenomenal, but they are. And I hope to help bring that out of them.
Yeah. Yeah. When I saw the acronym, I said that was pretty cool how you do.
Thank you.
So your life journey, as stated before, has given you a unique wisdom. If you had the chance to impart that wisdom with public policymakers, what would you share with them?
I apologize. Try that one more time.
If you had the chance to impart your wisdom with public policymakers, what would you share with them?
Okay. Your mental is so important. Your mental well-being, your mental welfare, your family's mental, anybody you surround, your children, if you don't have children, your whomever that you have that's close to your partner, your husband, your spouse, whomever it is, your mental in any type of relationship, work relationship, personal relationship is important. It should be it should be right under your spirituality. It should be about, okay, God, and then is my head straight? Am I good today? Because what you feed in this brain of ours, it will dictate your entire day. It will dictate your mood. It will dictate whether you want to get into the physical aspect of your body. You want to go work out. No, I really don't. Well, that's that mental aspect. For work, for individuals that work all the time, if you don't give yourself that grace to take some time off for yourself, your mental will be off balance. When you are going out and you're in a relationship and you're dating, if your mental is not there because you're still focused on the prior relationship that hurt you so badly that you don't know how to function with the next person that probably is good for you, but you don't know that because your mental is off. It works in so many ways. When we're parents and we're inundated with work, spouse, no partner. You're doing it by yourself. Your kids are hungry. You still got to do this. You got to do that. Your mental is important. And that is why I went from a forensic science major thinking about science because I love science. However, I love the mental aspect of human beings. And I have so much to share, so many techniques, so many advocacy messages that I want to share with people, individuals, not just women, but to share, to show that if your mental isn't okay, no matter where you are, that dictates your mood. You can have God in your life. You can leave church and your mental, if you're depressed about something and you were good when you left that church building, but now your mental has gotten to you. It can happen anywhere. So yeah, that spirituality is there, but that mental has to be number two in my book. So I want to promote that as best I can to anyone listening. I want to, like I said, I'm an advocate of therapy. I'm an advocate of mental health care, taking that day off for you. My birthday is coming up on my next Monday, the 30th of March. And People are asking me, what am I going to do? Guess what I'm going to do? I'm going to do Leatrice. I am going to relax. I'm going to take a me day seriously. It's not about a party. It's not about going out to eat. I just want to do me. And that's what I hope individuals, when they come to me and they ask me, how do you do it? What's going on? How can I do it? You walk around with this smile and you got so much going on because it's my mental.
Well, consider this interview your birthday present for me because it's gonna drop right around your birthday. But happy birthday in advance for that. And
Thank you.
I guess from your answer, what you're saying is that if you were talking to people, public policy makers, is that they need to put more focus in on mental health and give people like you more opportunities to talk to constituents and people to try to help them and prioritize that.
Correct. Yes. Yes.
All right. So now I'm going to ask you the same question, but it's going to be a different group of people. If you had the chance to impart that wisdom with white women, what would you share?
The same thing. That's why I said Black means queen. Blessed like a queen in every way. It doesn't matter if they are Caucasian. It just, well, the stigmatism is different for Caucasian women. I mean, just like it is for Black women, Indian women, Native American, it doesn't matter. We all go through so much of the same thing, but not the same way. You know, like I'm divorced, but if I had, I know of several women like this. If they're Caucasian, and if they got the divorce, it will be detrimental for them because their bread, their everything is in their spouse working, and they're just so focused on taking care of home. I mean, they see themselves as valuable, but if something were to happen to that spouse, I would be highly concerned of them because they wouldn't even know how to probably handle stress, only because I know them personally. But I can't speak for every Caucasian woman because we're all so uniquely designed. But I'm just trying to say that it really doesn't matter, Caucasian, any color, any race. Your mental just has to be on point. And when I say on point, I mean, get it under control before you deal with your day. I love meditation. So I don't care who you are. Meditate. Do more sitting there in peace and quiet. You can hear a lot about yourself and you could talk to yourself and you could probably find some answers before you even jump in that shower about what you need to do for your next task. So it honestly, I really can't gear that toward a specific race, but I think my answer remains the same.
Gotcha. When a person sees Leatrice De Bruhl today, what do you hope they observe?
Someone that may have gone through so much in her life that she still can wake up with a smile, even if she's crying, because there are tears of joy as well. But when I see God's work, sometimes it makes me tear up because I'm grateful. But honestly, if you really look at my life, you would say, I literally, and actually I've had this from a close friend tell me this, and I just want to leave with this. She said, I was actually, it was many years ago, and I was still going through a lot back then. And she said to me, man, I don't know how you're doing it, because if that was me, I would have, I don't know what I would have done. And I'm like, let me just give you a little piece of advice. When a person is that close to the cliff, don't help push them, because that statement was not helpful at all. But so I am grateful that when people look at me, they're like, man, you might have went through a lot, but you're strong. You look strong because you're walking around here still the same Leatrice, still taking charge, still cracking a humorous joke just to lighten someone's mood, giving advice for free just because you see someone down. Just it's nothing is really about money with you. It's about happiness, comfort, and security. That's exactly it. But you'll never see that I'm lonely. You never see that I wish I can get married again. You'll never see that, I was recently incarcerated. You'll never see I just lost the love of my life, the true love of my life. You'll never see that distance away from my granddaughters who I wish I could see every day. You'll never see that. You'll never see I lost a 20-year career in law enforcement. You'll never see that on my face and the way I walk. And that is all given because of the glory of God. That's given to him. So the Leatrice today has been the Leatrice for years, and no circumstance is going to change me.
All right. So finish this sentence. I have hope because.
I have hope because I know God is in control.
All right. That's another mic drop. I like that. And I greatly appreciate that. So look, Leatrice De Bruhl, I greatly appreciate you taking the time to do this. I know your schedule's kind of tight, but tell people how they can get in touch with you, how they can get involved with the Grace to Grieve movement, the Phenomenal Black Women organization. Just go ahead and make your pitch.
Yes. So you can reach me. I'm actually on LinkedIn, social. Let me get it together. I'm on LinkedIn, Instagram, and TikTok. And under LinkedIn, you'll see my name, Leatrice De Bruhl, and you'll also see Phenomenal Black Women. When you see Instagram or TikTok, it's Leatrice Speaks Life. So, and that's on purpose. Like, I want to speak life into existence. I don't want to focus on the things that are kind of going south in your life. I speak life. So hopefully that will remind you to look me up with Leatrice, which is Leatrice, Speaks Life. And you'll remember that. And so that's a way you could definitely DM me, look me up that way. And you'll see all kinds of messages. You'll definitely know who it is because you'll see a lot of messages with me and my son or me in the business. And there's another way you can contact me. I'll give out my work cell. I don't mind doing that. And it's area code 757-284-6283. Had to think about it. But that's my business cell. But either way, if you get me on either three of those platforms, I will definitely respond to you. And I also have another book that's coming out. I have one book that's already out. It was an anthology project. It's called In the Pursuit of Living. And that's co-authored with other women with fantastic stories. But that was really just an opener, a sneak peek for my book, which is on the way. And it's called Craziness Faith. So please be on the lookout for that. And I can't wait to do speaking engagements. Hint, hint, for anyone that's interested in hearing more about my story.
Well, our rule is that with the podcast is that you have an open invitation. Now that you've been on, have an open invitation to come back. So once that book is completed and you're ready to, share that with the world, then feel free to come back on and we'll talk about that book as well.
Amazing. Thank you so much, Eric, for this opportunity.
Well, Leatrice, I thank you for taking the time. And I know you got to go and we'll chat some more later on, but I really appreciate you taking the time because I wanted my audience to meet somebody. My goal is always to get somebody on that inspires other people. And I felt that you were that kind of a person. So I'm really, really glad that we were able to make this happen.
Wow. And that means a lot. You're right. This is an early birthday gift. Thank you so much.
Guys, and we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right. And we are back. And so it is time for my next guest, W. Ralph Eubanks. W. Ralph Eubanks is a faculty fellow and writer in residence at the Center for the Study of Southern Culture at the University of Mississippi. He is the author of A Place Like Mississippi, A Journey Through a Real and Imagined Literary Landscape, as well as two other works of nonfiction, Ever Is a Long Time and The House at the End of the Road. A Guggenheim Fellow and a Harvard Radcliffe Institute Fellow, he is also the recipient of a 2023 Mississippi Governor's Arts Award for Excellence in Literature. His writing has appeared in Vanity Fair, The American Scholar, The Georgia Review, and The New Yorker. His latest books, which we are going to discuss, on the podcast is When It's Darkness in the Delta. Ladies and gentlemen, it is truly my distinct honor and privilege to have as a guest on this podcast, W. Ralph Eubanks. All right, ladies and gentlemen, as you know from this podcast that I spent a long time in Mississippi. And, one of the things that Mississippi is known for, surprisingly to a lot of people, is that there have been some literary giants that have existed. You've heard names like William Faulkner, Eudora Welty, Richard Wright. Matter of fact, there's a statue of the three of them in downtown Jackson. John Grisham, Jesmond Ward, and I have another member of that writing pantheon as a guest on the podcast. So, ladies and gentlemen, I want y'all to enjoy the conversation I'm going to have with W. Ralph Eubanks. Mr. Eubanks, thank you for coming on the show. I greatly appreciate that.
Oh, thank you. It's great to be with you, and great to be with, I guess, another fellow Mississippian.
Yes, sir. Yes, sir. I spent 34 years there, and I used to tell people I grew up in Chicago, but you know the history of the migration. So my dad was born in Marks, so I used to tell people all the time I'm from North Mississippi, a little small town.
Yeah, well, you're from the town where the mule train started out for the Poor People's Campaign in 1968.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. So, Mr. Eubanks, what I like to do is to do a couple of icebreakers to kind of get the conversation going. Okay. So the first is a quote that I want you to respond to. And the quote is, "Brethren, I could not myself to have apprehended, but this one thing I do, forgetting those things which are behind and reaching forth unto those things which are before." What does that quote mean to you?
Well, that quote is from the Apostle Paul. It's also from the King James translation of the Bible, which is why it's a little bit kind of obtuse in the way that it's constructed. And it's one that sits outside of it's all over the state penitentiary at Parchman, where I taught writing for a year. And what it says to me, it is about the Apostle Paul, and he's talking about the Apostle Paul's actually kind of taking a victory lap here. And he's not really talking about, the stoning of St. Stephen the Martyr. He's ignoring all these things that have happened. And it is about kind of this forgiveness that he's being granted. And what I realized from that quote that's there, he's being granted this forgiveness, yet I'm going every week at the time to teach in Unit 29 at Parchman State Penitentiary, which is where people are in prison for life. And there is no forgiveness that's being granted to these men. There's none of the grace that the Apostle Paul is talking about that's going to be bestowed on these people, which makes me question, why is this sign even outside of the prison? It also speaks to me about the way that Parchman was once a place that was as a means of social control. Race was a means of social control. What it says to me now is that religion is being used as a means of social control to make people passive and not really resist the forces that they're having to confront while they are incarcerated.
Yeah, yeah. And I got that sense from the book. So the next icebreaker is what I call 20 questions.
Okay.
So I need you to give me a number between 1 and 20.
Okay. I'm going to give you my lucky number, 13.
Okay. Do you think there is such a thing as unbiased news or media, and why?
There is not such a thing as unbiased news or media. I think we all bring our biases into what it is that we are writing about or reporting on. But it is even though, but it's how we actually present those biases. For me, I'm very upfront about my connection to Mississippi, my relationship with the South, and that I look at writing about the South from a perspective of exile. That's very much a part of the way that I frame the way that I am writing about it. But that doesn't mean that anything that I'm writing is less truthful, but it is coming from that particular lens. And I think we all kind of put our lens over what it is. And it's important to understand what is the author's particular lens. And there are people who may not engage with my writing because of that lens. But is it complete? Can it ever be completely unbiased? No. Can it be even-handed? And yes, but I think the most important thing is truthful. Truth is probably the most important piece of it. And I see this connection between knowledge and truth. Once we learn about things, more about them, and we can kind of come to what we see as the truth, or at least a shared truth.
Okay. Well, the way you answer that kind of helps me ask this personal question I want from you.
Okay.
Want to ask you, I should say. Do you look back on your life and think about your success, especially as a purveyor of Mississippi stories? And I don't know if you heard the when I was starting off the interview, when I was citing all those names and stuff. And, I put you in that pantheon with those other Mississippi writers. But because you feel that you're writing from a position of exile, are you surprised of how successful you have been, how people have received your work talking about Mississippi?
I guess I am, but there's another important thing that I have to say that I always do is that someone told me a long time ago, never believe the publicity about yourself. So, yeah, it's great to be, for people to kind of include me in that pantheon, but do I actually kind of walk around thinking about being part of that pantheon? No, I don't. I think more about this. I write about the South and I write about Mississippi because I want it to be a better place. And I do use that perspective of exile in order to try to get to some type of truth about the place. I fear that if I get too close to it, there are things that I won't see, that I want others to see. And then I may be kind of engaging in bringing some coating of nostalgia to writing about the place. I try to stay away from that as much as I can. Does it creep in sometimes? Yeah, it does. Because this is the place where I'm from. This is the place that shaped me. But I'm also trying to keep, that perspective of outsiderism while at the same time being an insider, having been born here, being, as Richard Wright would say, a native son.
All right. So you've had the privilege of teaching at UVA, George Mason, Howard, and Millsaps. But do those students compare to the writers you taught at Parchment?
They do. I would put them as they're equals. And I think what separates them is, I guess the thing that really separates them is very often privilege. And, so many of the students that I work with in Parchment, as I said, I saw this connection between poverty and violence. And that poverty and violence, that intersection, led them to commit crimes that landed them in Parchment. Whereas my students at Millsaps and, all these, great schools that I've had the opportunity to be a professor at, those students were able to, they had a more middle class background that shielded them from kind of having to move into that violence because they had the things that they needed that didn't lead them into committing crimes that they committed because they were poor. And that's the thing that separates them. They're just as perceptive. And also the other thing is I realized too is so many of the men that I worked with at Parchman didn't quite fit in to the round hole. They're the square pegs that didn't fit into the round hole of the education system. And they did not have come from families that had the means to kind of figure out where can I take this child to get them to learn these things. I mean, I have 3 children and they all went to 3 different schools because I saw they were all very different. And I wanted to find somewhere where that fit for them. And I did that. Because I'm a person of great privilege. But these men did not come from families of privilege who had the power to do that.
Yes. All right. So this book we're discussing, When Is Darkness on the Delta, you said only by looking at both the forces of history and the way we live now can we begin to understand not only the Mississippi Delta, but also the forces of inequality that have shaped America itself. That means the story of the people of the Delta is not just a Mississippi story, nor is it just a Southern story. At its very core, the Delta story is an American story. Was that your motivation to write this book, to have the world understand the importance of the Mississippi Delta?
It was to understand the story of the Mississippi Delta, but I have to say it's maybe not where I started. It's kind of where I ended up with this, realizing that I think I started out writing about the Mississippi Delta. And it wasn't until I was deep into the project that I realized I wasn't really just writing about the Delta. I was writing about America itself and beginning to see the Delta in so many ways as a mirror to America, Mississippi as a mirror to America. So those are things that I really came to in the course of doing my research, in the course of writing. I mean, this is a book that I started 10 years ago and I put aside, and I wrote a book called A Place Like Mississippi, which is a journey through Mississippi's literary landscape. And it was while I was working on that book that I began to kind of get a sense of my voice to tell this story. And my editor was reading a chapter of A Place Like Mississippi, and he said, I really like what you're doing here, but where are you? And I was kind of deliberately kind of taking myself out of the narrative. One of the things that I learned from him is kind of like, where could I kind of go into the narrative and how did I begin to kind of fade out of it and let these other voices kind of expand and take hold of the narrative. And that's what that editor taught me. It was that lesson that I learned while writing that book that I began to apply when I returned to this book. And when I returned to it, that's when I kind of came to that revelation. This is really about America itself. The original subtitle was An American Reckoning. And I use that as the working subtitle because I realized that's what I'm doing. It is not just a Southern reckoning, it's an American reckoning.
Yeah. All right. So what is the deal with all the blues lyrics in the book?
You know, the reason I use the blues lyrics as epigraphs is I wanted the reader to see that that the blues tells the story of the Delta. And that that everything that I'm writing about, whether it is healthcare, education, place, history, there's some thread from the blues that connects all of those things. And I wanted people again to think of them the way that sociologist Clyde Woods said we should think about the blues. We should think about people who wrote the blues as sociologists, as therapists, as poets. So that's how I wanted people to begin to think about the blues. And if you go to Spotify. I actually have a Spotify playlist with all the music. So it's almost like it's a soundtrack for the book. So I wanted the reader to kind of get this story of it, but I also wanted them to kind of have this other soundtrack that kind of told a parallel story along with it.
Yeah. And you were kind of self-revelatory when you said, you was young. I think you had a chance to meet one of the blues greats.
Booker White.
Yeah. And you were like, yeah, Mom, why are we going to have dinner with this dude? You know what I'm saying? So it's
Yeah,
so as your evolution in your exile, as you put it, has that evolution in the love of the blues grown?
It has grown, and it has, it's interesting. I came to that revelation about Booker White while I was on a fellowship at the Harvard Radcliffe Institute. And I got to go into this archive that had this interview that was done with Booker White. He was going to make an appearance at Club Passim in Harvard Square in Cambridge. But on the trip there, he had a stroke. And a local journalist sat down and did a long oral history with him. And I'm reading this, and I'm thinking about the date, and I'm saying, this is 1976. I saw him in 1976. What I realized is that he left that performance and went to Massachusetts after that, had the stroke, and was dead 6 months later. And that's when I began to realize this great missed opportunity I had as an arrogant 19-year-old telling my mother the blues is the music of oppression, because that's the way that my friends and I saw that music. We saw it as, connected to slavery, but it had no connection to slavery at all. It had connection to survival of people in the 20th century, post Reconstruction. And that's when I realized what an arrogant, ignorant little snot I was at 19. and it began to, my relationship with the blues had been evolving, but that was, making that connection was a real revelatory moment for me.
Yeah. All right. So why is Mileston a significant place for you and for the history of Black folks in the Mississippi Delta?
It's significant for me because my father went to work there in 1949 after he graduated from Tuskegee. He never really told me why. When I said, why did you come to the Delta? He said, I came there for opportunity. And being very young, my father died when I was 18. I didn't ask more questions about it. So in some ways, this is a way for me to kind of probe a lot deeper. But the reason it's much so important for Black people of the South is it was a resettlement community that took a former plantation, subdivided, the federal government subdivided it to, I think it was 111 families, if I'm not mistaken, the number there, and moved them from sharecropping to landowning. And today, that segment of land is the largest Black-owned segment of land in the Mississippi Delta. And that's why it's significant. And there could have been more milestones had the state of Mississippi not blocked more of those Black resettlement communities from happening. And they stopped it because they had these white politicians, these white segregationist politicians, believe that if more Black people owned this land, that they were going to ask to vote. They were going to demand suffrage. And Mileston and Holmes County, those were the first people to demand to register to vote in that county. So they were right about that. But that was the fear. That fear was actually a very real one.
Yeah. Yeah. And it's a very significant place. I never had the privilege of stopping there. I always ended up either going to Chula or Ruleville on that side of Holmes County if I had to go up that way. But you had to pass it if you took 49E.
Yeah.
And, and a lot of people need to understand the history of Mileston. And I'm glad that you highlighted it. But speaking of special places, Mound Bayou is a special place for me because I have family there. But why is it a special place for most Black Mississippians?
It's a special place because it was a Black-owned town, an independent, Black-owned, Black-run town. and established by formerly enslaved people from around Vicksburg who were enslaved on the plantation of the brother of Jefferson Davis, the president of the Confederacy. And, once there was the land that they were on was contested and crops started to fail, they left that place and moved to the Delta and created their own world there in Mound Bayou, and were incredibly independent. And I'd say Mound Bayou went through two really significant periods from its founding in the 1890s, probably through the collapse of cotton in the 1920s. And then it undergoes a renaissance in the post-war era with the arrival of Dr. T.R.M. Howard, the establishment of Taborian Hospital, which becomes kind of a key spot for healthcare in the Mississippi Delta. And Mound Bayou becomes a place of refuge for Mamie Till Mobley during the trial of Emmett Till.
Yeah. We had our last family reunion I went to. We were in Mound Bayou. We did like one thing, and then we spent most of the time in Cleveland, just up the road. But yeah, there was a colleague when I served in the Mississippi House. There was a young lady named Linda Coleman, was a state representative there at the time. She's a judge now. And I used to tell everybody, you give Linda what you want because she represents my people. And she always thought that was like, why are you putting that pressure on? It's the truth. She represented my people. So yeah, Mound Bayou is a cool place. What was the big deal about Chinese grocery stores?
Chinese grocery stores, the Chinese were brought to the Delta to pick cotton, as, the exodusters were leaving, the ones that I guess Nell Irving Painter referred to as exodusters were beginning to move west. They brought in the Chinese. They also brought in the Italians. And both of those groups says, we are not doing this work. But what the Chinese did is they started grocery stores that were largely in Black communities. In a lot of ways, what they did is they competed with the plantation commissaries. And all of the clientele of those stores were Black. And actually the same with some of the Lebanese businesses too. It's like I was speaking with a friend of mine who's from Greenville, and his family owned a grocery store in Greenville. He's Lebanese. And he said all of our clientele was Black. We served those communities because the white stores did not. And that's what that's the significance of the Chinese grocery stores as I see it. They once they left, that's why I think that the Delta is a food desert today, is those Chinese grocery stores filled a very important need in Black communities across the Delta.
Yeah. People look at Mississippi and they listen to the politics now and they like, oh, that can't be a good place for immigrants. But it's like Mississippi was, really a haven. Actually, haven might be too altruistic a word, but it was a place where a lot of immigrants landed and contributed. One of the most popular weathermen in the history of Mississippi was this guy named Woody Asaph.
I know. I remember Woody Asaph.
And people were like, it was like, oh, that's Woody. But they didn't concentrate on the Asaph part, right? And he's Lebanese. And so his family, I think his daughter was a city council person in one of the suburbs of Jackson and all that. So, they were accepted because they had roots, right? The same as going to the Delta. It was a mind-blowing experience to walk into a store and you see somebody of Asian descent. And Sinners, the movie Sinners, kind of highlighted that. When you walk into the store, you had this person of Asian descent and they're talking just like Bubba from right down the road.
Well, I went to school at the University of Mississippi with a number of Delta Chinese. My dear friend Gwendolyn Gong, her family owned a grocery store in Boyle, Mississippi, and her mother arrived there from China. Very complicated story kind of getting there, but she said her mother learned to cook from the Black women who were patrons of the store. And she always asked, what do you make with that? And because her mother wanted them to eat like Southerners. And those Black women taught her mother how to cook.
Yeah. Yeah. It's just a cool experience. So I want to get in a couple more questions while I have you. In another part of the book, you said caste may no longer divide the Delta's people into perceived superior and inferior groups, but race still regulates the behavior of each group. The plantation system is gone, but the remnants of that system still wield power. Break that down for the listeners.
Well, race is still very much a divide line, largely because the school systems are divided. There was never school integration for all practical purposes, never really happened in most of those Delta towns. So, and the other thing that I would say with the idea of the plantation that's there, the plantation mindset continued over time because there was nothing that kind of came in to, getting suffrage really and getting the vote and getting political power changed things a great deal, but economic power did not come with that. And therein kind of lies that divide. And then that allowed this whole idea of the plantation mentality to persist, because even though you've got political power, there was never really this real change in mindset that happened there. It's all part of this continuum from the past. And, I'm always, just looking for these connections between the past and the present. And when you go around the Delta, you see that connection to that plantation past, right? Kind of, you see it on the landscape and among the way that people interact with each other all the time. It is a constant. So there may not be, that idea of caste separating people, or race still separates people.
Yeah. And, you mentioned the schools because I one of the things about being involved in Mississippi politics, you can travel the state. It's a good sized state, but it's not huge like Texas or somewhere like that. And I remember going, and it was like, if you live in Jackson, it's like when you say these private academies, right? And you use the term segregated academies because that's what they were, because all of them started like after the Brown decision. You go to Jackson Academy, Jackson Prep, you see like, oh, wow, oh yeah, and it's like, yeah, the white folks paid for that. You know what I'm saying? But if you go up to the Delta, right, it's like where you've got the public schools, and then you say, well, I want to go to, I think it's Pillow Academy, I think is one of them.
Pillow Academy.
Yeah. And it's a bunch of permanent steel buildings. And I'm like going, y'all paying for that? Y'all would rather pay for to be in school to permanent than going to a brick and mortar building? I just, I said, ooh, the racism is strong there. You know what I'm saying? So that's why I want people to understand Mississippi has evolved in a certain way, but it's still, that race thing is still real. And you highlighted the fact that it's more on the economic power rather than anything else.
It is with respect to the economic power. And what is so interesting about the segregated school system, and one of the things that I kind of highlight in this book, is how that shift toward segregated academies, it's accepted by everyone that's there because no one kind of remembers that time of integration. And when I interviewed students there, they had no idea that, they said there are just these schools here that only white people go to because you have to pay to go to them. And they didn't understand that there was a whole history with those.
Yeah. All right. So talk about the impact of philanthropy versus government assistance as it relates to the Delta. And I found out something in the book that I didn't even know. At one time, it was hard. It was a challenge for a native Mississippian to start a foundation. I did not know that. And when I was reading, I was like, huh, That's amazing. That explains why you have more foundations from outside the state giving money as opposed to the local foundations. I just assume because Mississippi underpays everybody that you didn't have the abundance of rich folks to give money back. But
Right. Right. I mean, that question I began to ask myself is, there's all this wealth that's created with cotton. Why didn't any of that wealth create a Carnegie or Rockefeller Foundation? And the reason it didn't is because there was something called a Mortmain statute that did not allow people to leave estates to nonprofit organizations. You could if you were a bachelor. And so the Hardin Foundation, which is a foundation in Mississippi that supports educational initiatives, Phil Hardin was a bachelor. So he was able to establish a foundation. And those laws did not change until I think it was the mid-1980s. But thinking about philanthropy, government, is that the way that Mississippi has viewed philanthropy, people like the Kellogg Foundation coming to Mississippi with their Mississippi Delta initiative, is they viewed them as, okay, you want to tackle that? You go right ahead. We don't have anything to do with it. Whereas what philanthropy is thinking, we're going to kind of do some work here and we're going to figure out what actually works here. And then we want government to come in and take that over, state government. And then, you have to have the federal government with monetary policy. Mississippi Delta is under the supervision of the Federal Reserve Bank of St. Louis. So you've got to have connections there. And if all those things could work together, there could be some transformative impact, but they don't really work together. They're not really coordinated in the way that they should be. As someone at the St. Louis Fed said to me, the Delta has been philanthropy bombed. So it's like there's lots of philanthropy that has come in, and nothing is really stuck because no one really asked the local people what it was they needed. And what was needed in Drew is different from what's needed in Greenwood and what's needed in Mount Bayou, what's needed in Clarksdale. So realizing these are all places with unique histories and cultures, and you have to figure out what's going to work each of those places.
Yeah. And there's so many things. I had so many questions for you, man. It's like, because you highlight Robert Kennedy's tour to Delta and you really get into why that was a monumental thing. You highlight people like Gloria Carter Dickerson and her family and how their big role in the Delta and all that. But we don't have time to do all that. I just want people to read the book. But what do you want readers of this book to take away from it?
What I want readers to take away is I want them to begin to see and know things about the Delta in a very different way. As I say, you can't thinking about piggybacking what Robert Kennedy said when he came to the Delta, unless we change what we see, we can't change what we know. And he really wanted to kind of change what we see and what we know, and then to kind of create, greater social change there. And that's the big takeaway I want people to come away from with this book is, how do we change our way of seeing the Mississippi Delta? And the way we change it is by what we know about it. I want them to learn about it. And then I want them to think about how many other places around the country are deltas. Whether it is Appalachia, whether it is the Black Belt of Alabama, or whether it's Western Pennsylvania. There are all of these places. I quote the photographer LaToya Ruby Frazier, who's from Braddock, Pennsylvania. She says, I go around the other parts of the country and I see Braddock. Well, I go to other parts of the country and I see the Mississippi Delta. And I want people to begin to see that and make those connections and realize that the connections between these places and the roots of American income inequality. That's what I want people to take away.
And ladies and gentlemen, I think Braddock, Pennsylvania is the place that Senator Fetterman was the mayor of before he got elected the senator.
That is exactly right.
Okay. There's a tie-in to that later on in the podcast. But anyway, I'm glad you brought that up. Finish this sentence. I have hope because.
I have hope because there are people in the Mississippi Delta who have hope and are actually doing the work to transform the place, in spite of forces to the contrary that would say that they should not have any hope at all.
Okay. So how do people get this book? When is Darkness on the Delta? How can people reach out to you? Just go ahead and make
people can find my book in bookstores everywhere. And if you would actually like a signed copy of the book, you can order one from Square Books in Oxford, Mississippi at squarebooks.com. You can find me at wralphubanks.com.
Well, W. Ralph Eubanks, it is truly an honor of mine to have you as a guest on the podcast. When I was approached and said, would you like for him to come on? I was like, sure. It was just kind of like, so let me put it in perspective for you, sir. When I was student body president at Jackson State, we were trying to put together our homecoming concert. And initially we had this rapper named Joski Love that was coming in. He was kind of popular, but he wasn't big time, but it was somebody we thought we, could afford. Right. And so the promoters called us and said, yeah, Joski Love ain't going to make it. Would y'all accept Run DMC instead? And we were like, yeah, we'll take Run DMC. So when I was approached for you coming in, it was that same kind of enthusiasm. It was like, yeah, Mr. Eubanks wants to be on my podcast? Sure. So it's really, really been an honor to talk to you and to meet you. And the rule is that once you've been on, you have an open invitation to come back. So when you write your next book or whatever, yeah, feel free to come on back and we'll talk about that too.
I would love to do that.
All right.
Love to.
All right, guys, we're going to catch y'all on the other side. All right. And we are back. So I want to thank Leatrice De Bruhl and W. Ralph Eubanks for coming on the podcast. It really is cool when people feel comfortable enough to tell their stories. And I know Leatrice has been through a lot, but the fact that she has decided to take all of those experiences and try to help others as they go through is commendable. And, the timing couldn't be any more perfect in that she's celebrating another year of life while she's working to help people get through their life and the challenges that they face. So I think that's commendable, and I wish her continued success in that journey and her work. And then to sit down and talk to Ralph Eubanks, man, that's, I try not to be starstruck, but, I'm human, and, it's not like, I got like this Eubanks fan page and all that stuff. It's not like that. But I mean, to have somebody of his magnitude, somebody of his talent, and, the fact that he is teaching, we had to get through that interview as quick as possible because he had to meet a student like right away after the interview. It's just that rare combination. He's very humble and down to earth person, but a tremendous talent. And just another reminder to the nation and to the world that Mississippi has a lot to offer. I remember growing up in Chicago, Mississippi was the butt of a lot of jokes, and that was based off of bitter and terrible experiences. And even living there, you would hear the connotations. So it was always important for me whenever I was on a national stage or platform, whatever, whether it was at a convention or, a meeting, conference, whatever, that I was one, on my best behavior, and two, I put my best foot forward because I wanted people to have a different mindset about Mississippi. And for some folks, I was probably the first person or the closest they ever got to somebody from Mississippi, right? And, and it wasn't just me. It was a lot of us that had the privilege to do that. We kind of felt we had that obligation. When we were in a position to relax and, as the folks say, let your hair down and all that stuff. I mean, we enjoyed, like if we were out of town or whatever, and enjoyed the city we were in. But when it came down to business, we were about that business. And it's an obligation because people say so many bad things. And when you look at all of these people, it doesn't matter whether it's music or sports or film, the arts, as far as, sculpting or whatever. I mean, writing, Mississippi has contributed in a great way. And I hope that some people recognize that there's been some decent people that came out of Mississippi in politics as well. So, it's just that kind of vibe. And to just be in the presence of somebody else that has represented Mississippi well was really, really cool. And so y'all need to get that book, When It's Darkness in the Delta. Please get that. And I hope I said that right. But it was really a treat to talk to both of them. But now I got to get into the dirty stuff. And this particular rant is directed toward two individuals. Now, I know I'm just a voice out here in the wilderness, and my opinions are based on my experience and, what I see and what I hear. But, I have the right to say them. And if by some chance these people hear it and they got a problem with it, well, they will find me. And, or they can find out. And, we can deal with that. Because, when I was elected, people had no problem saying, Fleming, I think this, or I don't agree with that, or wherever the case may be. So I expect people to live by that same standard. Now, I know that in this day and age, because I have to remind myself that I haven't been an elected official in almost 20 years, things have changed. Personalities have changed of people that get elected. And, the biggest thing I miss is the honor part of it, right? The accountability part of it. And, leadership sets the example. And if we've got a president that never admits when they're wrong, doesn't have any sense of morality or accountability for himself, let alone others, has no empathy for other people, then that fans out. It's a ripple effect. It fans out throughout the nation. And so the people that are aligned with him politically are going to act the same way. Even people that are opposed to him will dive into that behavior, right? So there's two examples, two gentlemen. One, I didn't expect anything better. The other one, I had high hopes for, and it's been a total disappointment. And, I'll start with the disappointment first. And that's the senior senator from the state of Pennsylvania, or I guess if I was being formal, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, John Fetterman. When he ran, it was kind of an awkward deal because he was so favored to win. And this was his second time running for the U.S. Senate. But this time, he had been mayor of a town, Braddock, Pennsylvania. and he was the lieutenant governor of the state at the time he was running. And so he had built up a cachet. So by the time he ran the second time, even though a U.S. congressman was running against him, he was still the favorite. And then he got sick, right? He beat, I think it was Congressman Lamb. He beat him in the primary, and then he had the stroke right at the end of the primary. And so, his Republican opponent is Dr. Oz. That's who Fetterman beat. He beat Dr. Oz. So of course, Dr. Oz is, he is what he is. And, while he's busy trying to explain to us what charcuterie or hors d'oeuvres is, right? The fancy word for hors d'oeuvres. He was trying to explain how that was a problem in grocery stores and prices. Fetterman was trying to recover from a stroke, a serious stroke. I mean, anytime you're dealing with a stroke, that's life or death, right? So, we rallied around him, because he really needed surrogates, whether it was through our podcast or interviews or actually going to Pennsylvania and campaigning on his behalf alongside his wife, who, was the second lady of Pennsylvania. It was kind of a crusade to get him over the finish line. And there were concerns, but then when he started his recovery process and was brave enough to step in front of a microphone knowing that he wasn't quite all there, I mean, you couldn't help but rally around him, and we knew he was a different kind of cat because he didn't like to wear suits. He always liked to wear a hoodie or whatever the case may be. And, I guess when he had to speak on the Senate floor, he's conformed to wear at least a jacket and a tie for those moments. But, most of the time he's casually dressed. That was just kind of his quirk, his nature, right? But as he recovered, and I assume he was back in his right mind, fully functional, I mean, he still got some side effects from the stroke, but he's a lot healthier now than he was when he won the seat. Now we're seeing a side of him that is very, very concerning. Because in December of 2021, he made a statement that, this is when everybody was gearing up to run for the Senate in Pennsylvania. He made a statement that he wasn't going to be a U.S. Senator like Joe Manchin of West Virginia or Kyrsten Sinema of Arizona. He wasn't going to be that kind of Democrat. He was going to be a progressive Democrat. And that's what he said. Now, since he's been up there, he hasn't been the most reliable vote. He's been more of a Manchin or a Sinema Democrat, especially when it comes to issues dealing with Israel, right? It was one thing to stand with Israel when October 7th happened. That was understood. That was just, we went through 9/11. So we understood. All right, we got to deal with these folks. But then when it got to the point where it was a bloodlust, it was a genocide deal, then it was like, okay, well, we didn't sign up for that. We were down with you to deal with Hamas. We weren't down with you to wipe out every Palestinian that you see. If you got somebody from Hamas shooting back at you and you take them out, that's one thing. If you got somebody standing in line to get food and you shoot them, that's something totally different. And for some reason, there are people that don't get that. There's some reason that people can't make the difference in that. Nobody cheerleads for people that kill thousands of folks, kidnap people, all that. Nobody cheerleads for that except the people that do that kind of stuff. But on the flip side, You can't kill their third cousin who's not involved with any of that at all for no reason. You can't do that. I tell this story because this guy was a good guy as far as our relationship goes, but he was an inmate. And the reason why he was in jail was because somebody killed his brother. It was back in the day. They were gambling and stuff. You know, if y'all know that gambling culture, the rolling dice, whatever. So his brother got killed. So he killed the dude that killed his brother, right? So he got charged with manslaughter instead of murder. So he went to jail. He did his time. And then when he came out, he killed other people in that family. The family of the person he had already killed, he came back and killed a couple more of them, right? So at this point now, he's in jail for life. And he has been in jail, for both of his adult life now. And before I left the sheriff's office in Mississippi, he was assigned to what we call the county farm, where I was in Hinds County. And so a lot of us in the sheriff's office was trying to appeal to the governor to give him a pardon because, he had done over 40, 50 years in jail, right? And so at that point, we were working it, and it seemed like we were getting some movement. But a couple of us talked to him about it and let him know and say, well, hey, look, you've been a good trustee all these years, and, you've done more than your time. And, we want to see you at least the last few years of your life be free. And he told us that if he got out, he was going to finish the job. And you say, finish the job? What are you talking about? He said, as long as those people, that family still exists, the family of the person who killed his brother, they still exist, he's going to deal with them. He's going to take them out. I said, you too old to do all that. And he said, I would do my best. And so basically we said, yeah, that pardon thing we were talking about? Yeah, don't worry about that. Right? And that's what he wanted. He wants to die in jail. He's a grown man. He can make the decision. Right? And he told us why he should stay. The mindset that he has, the hatred he has for that family that killed his brother, is the same hatred we see in Netanyahu and the Israeli government when it comes to Palestinians, right? Because Hamas is an organization that you can pinpoint the leaders and take out, which they did. They took out the leaders. And, after they negotiated with them for a while and got some of the hostage out, they decided to take them out. So the remaining hostages were released by the temporary leadership that Hamas had put together to finish the deal. But then when you started killing everybody else, just because they're Palestinian, and you're still going into the West Bank with the people who are ruled by the Palestinian Authority, who are not friends of Hamas, you're still just taking land from them, just building settlements or whatever. And, it's just like the way that America was set up. It was like the Klan was in the South. And then you had all this other stuff going on in other cities. You had the riots and the rebellions and all that kind of stuff, race related, throughout the years. Well, that's the way it is in Israel. It's like the West Bank is where the Israeli Klan, for lack of a better term, those extremists go in the West Bank and harass the Palestinians and take land and all that kind of stuff. Land that was supposed to be set aside for them, right? Well, we've got to expand. Well, you're just going to have to build taller buildings. You just can't go into other people. You set that land, right? That's just like if the United States government decided now that we have all these Native American reservations set up, right? And then all of a sudden, you know what? We need to build some condos over there. It would be holy hell over here if we did that. But that's what's going on. And then on the flip side, you just basically wiped out the other settlement because Hamas was based out of there and they were running that part, right? But when you say that, then people want to say, oh, you hate Jewish people. Oh, you're anti-Semitic, all this stuff. That is not true. But nonetheless, they don't have to worry about that from John Fetterman because John Fetterman is down with the genocide. He's down with it. And, you know, it's like the minute people started saying, well, I think Donald Trump was influenced by Israel to attack Iran. And John Fetterman's like, let's go to war. What are we talking about? You want to go to war on behalf of Israel? And you're a U.S. senator? What are we doing? You know, and then when Rand Paul voted against Mark Wayne Mullen to be the DHS secretary, if Fetterman had voted with his fellow Democrats, Mullen wouldn't have got the job because he wouldn't have got out of committee. But it was because of Fetterman, Mullen got the job, right? And it's like, well, you know, I served with him. Rand Paul served with him. Y'all were in the Senate together as of like 2 weeks ago. Y'all were all there together. If the chairman of the committee he had to go through did not want him. Now, I blame Rand Paul for even having a hearing. If I was the chairman, that hearing would be like, maybe we'll do it in November after the election. He would be the acting secretary for a long time. If that was me. And I had the history that Rand Paul had with him. But Paul had the hearing. He said what he needed to say and he voted against it. So in a normal world, that nomination would be dead. But John Fetterman decided to be a hero to a guy that doesn't give a damn about him or people that look like his wife, right? Which is a whole nother dynamic I'm trying to figure out because Donald Trump is married to an immigrant. John Fetterman's married to an immigrant. J.D. Vance is married to an immigrant. But they all hate immigrants. And in Fetterman's case, it's your actions, not your words, right? Because you voted for Mark Wayne Mullen. You voted for Kristi Noem. You see how that turned out. So you might like your wife, but you don't like any other immigrants. I'm just saying, you know, they've all had kids by these immigrants. So all this talk about birthright citizenship and all that. Now they're down with ending that. Your current life existence. You have children that fall in that category. What are we talking about? You know, people are going to be cruel and, you know, say something, well, he never recovered from the stroke, Fleming. You know, that's just how I go ahead. Bruh, I'm going to give him the benefit of the doubt because he's still showing up. Now, I've heard reports that he's cruel to his staff and all that stuff, but that's usually how they try to get you out in a smooth way. You know, there's a number of House and Senate members that people say on both sides that say, oh, you know, well, yeah, she's really tough to work with, or he's really tough to work with. You know, you are dealing with certain types of personalities that run for office. But I'm hung up on this mindset where it's like, I don't like immigrants, but I'm married to one. I want to support a country destroying an entire population of people. For what? Money? I don't get it. And I think, and then you broke your promise because you had people like Bernie Sanders and all these other folks. Hell, you had people like me saying, please vote for this guy. Now, was he better than Mesmet Oz? Of course he was. But, we didn't think we were just getting Oz Light, right? So he's safe this year because his seat is not up. His seat won't be up till 2028. So we'll have to deal with him just like we have to deal with the president until that election cycle. But I hope that something happens, that he has a Damascus Road experience and he gets back to the person that people thought he would be, the kind of mayor that he was, the kind of lieutenant governor that he was, right? That's what they're hoping for. The guy who was listed as one of America's best mayors, who single-handedly, because he fought with the city council tooth and nail, single-handedly did everything he could do, whether it was like reviving a building, starting a restaurant, whatever, to kind of keep the economy going in the town that he was only getting paid $150 a month, I think, to be the mayor of. So anyway, that's my deal with Fetterman. Now, this other guy, I guess I won't have a whole lot of time to talk to him because he's not really worth it, but this guy's name is James Utmeyer. So James is an attorney in the state of Florida. He was until Marco Rubio became the Secretary of State, the chief of staff for Ron DeSantis. So already he's the Stephen Miller of Florida, right? So because of Rubio ascending, that meant that the Attorney General, I think her name was Moody, DeSantis moved her into the Senate position, and then he gave his chief of staff the position of Attorney General. And, he was just doing the typical stuff that all these Florida Republicans are doing. And, but up until this point, his most egregious thing was alligator Alcatraz, right? Because he was the brains behind that. He was the one who made the proposal, picked the spot, came up with the plan to build it, right? And of course, led the fight in court to stop the Native American nation that was suing on the land they encroached on. And of course, being the Attorney General, he fought them and got the case dismissed, the lawsuit. But he showed his utter brazen ignorance, right? Because that's what we are now. It's not just normal ignorance and naivete. It's brazen. A lot of people are humbled by their ignorance. At least that's the way it used to be. But over these last 10 years, these folks are wearing their ignorance like a badge of honor. And so he decided he was going to write a letter to the National Football League. Just random as hell. He decides to write and to state to them that the Rooney Rule was a violation of Florida law. And he felt he had jurisdiction to say that because there are there's 3 NFL teams in the state of Florida. The Jacksonville Jaguars, the Miami Dolphins, and the Tampa Bay Buccaneers, right? So Jacksonville the Rooney Rule is the rule that was brought in after Tony Dungy was fired by the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Tony Dungy had built the Tampa Bay Buccaneers into a contending team. And they fired him and hired John Gruden. And that's the year that John Gruden won his Super Bowl. Because he was with the Raiders and they lured him from the Raiders to coach Tampa Bay, and they won. And of course, they beat the Raiders, right? The team he had just coached, the team he knew. And he took the team that Dungy had built and won. And so Dungy, but he primarily played for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Well, Mr. Rooney is the owner of the Steelers. And him and Tony were close. And so he got with the other owners and said, hey, look, we got to protect these black coaches from getting fired, and they're doing their job. They're winning. They may not win the Super Bowl. Not everybody can win the Super Bowl, but you get into the playoffs, winning your division, whatever. You have a winning record. It's the National Football League. It's not supposed to be easy. And there was another coach that got fired around the same time, had a winning record. And so Mr. Rooney convinced the other owners to come up with a rule that would say that all of them have to at least interview, black prospective coaches, right? They have to at least interview some black candidates for those vacant positions whenever they come up. And they agreed to that. So that's been going on since, I guess, 2003. So since the Rooney Rule has been in place, which obviously Mr. Urtmeyer has no clue about, right? Since the Rooney Rule has been in place, 2 of the 3 teams in Florida has had a black coach. Brian Flores was the coach in Miami for a minute, and Todd Bowles is still the coach at Tampa Bay. And so I don't know if Mr. Urtmeyer even pays attention to that for him to write that letter. But to sit there and say, well, it discriminates against white men, because that's the whole argument about DEI. It's like diversity, equity, and inclusion is discriminatory to white men. Anyway, so again, I don't know. Mr. Urtmeyer ran track at Florida. I don't know if he paid attention to what happened to the football players that played at Florida during that time and where they went in the National Football League. But obviously, Mr. Urtmeyer doesn't understand that all of the owners are white. Only 3 of the coaches are black. I mean, think you have a few more general managers than coaches that are black. Not many. But there's nothing in the National Football League that discriminates against white people. Nothing. The commissioner's white. I mean, we never had a black commissioner. If there's any disparity, it's the fact that 75 to 80% of the players are black, which is the reason why people are like, well, these guys that played the game, the white guys that don't play anymore, get a shot to coach. Why not the black guys? Especially since they make up the majority of the league. But Mr. Urtmeyer is too fragile for that. We all know that his boss is too fragile for that, DeSantis. So all I need to say about all this stuff is that we've got to get these people out of office. Because Urtmeyer is running this year in Florida. He was appointed to the position, but the position is up on the ballot this year. And I hope that Florida can continue to do the thing. We congratulate Ms. Gregory for pulling off the victory and flipping that seat. So now Donald Trump is actually represented in the state house of Florida by a Democrat. Love that for him. And I hope that that's a trend in Florida, that we can see some Democrats get the statewide office, because the last statewide Democrat is now the chair of the party, Nikki Fried. And if they had been smart, they would have had her run against DeSantis the second time. First of all, they should have voted for Andrew Gillum. That was the first thing they should have done. But they didn't do that. And so, at least not enough folks, because it was close. But the second time around, Nikki should have had her shot. Nonetheless, Ms. Fried is doing a wonderful job as the chair of the Florida Democratic Party. And so now we hope that she can make this turn statewide, especially for these statewide positions. But I promise you, if you can't get anybody else, please get Urtmeyer out of there. Get him out. You got it. The positions you got to get is governor, secretary of state, attorney general. The insurance commissioner is Republican or Democrat. I'm partisan, so I want Democrats to win, right? But In the scheme of things, the most dangerous positions right now that the Republicans are using as weapons is the Secretary of State, the Attorney General, and the Governor's Mansion. Those are the three positions that you got to get this MAGA influence out of in every state. And, Utmeyer has proven with this letter to the National Football League that he's not worthy of the position. If you want to have a podcast, bro, like me, if you want to be an advisor to people, that's fine. But you should not be given a taste of any kind of power or political responsibility. Because you crazy, right? You didn't have a stroke like Mr. Fetterman. You're crazy on your own fruition. The NFL discriminates against white people? As the old folks say, I didn't heard it all, y'all. It's just, we gotta get away from these people. We gotta get them out. We can't be like the movie The Purge and violently take them out. Although there's some people I know that desire that. But we gotta use the process to get them out, which means that you gotta show up. Shout out to all the people that attended the No Kings rallies, right? But you gotta show up on election day too. Just like you took the time to show up to any kind of demonstration, you got to take the time in your respective states on election day. If your state has early voting, take advantage of that. But we got to get these people out. Again, it's like, and they say that when Rome burned, Nero fiddled. In the United States, Trump is golfing. We're talking about the price of ballpoint pens or how many cognitive tests he's taken, right? Enough of that foolishness. It's just time out for that. We've got to take it to the new level for the next 250 years. And the way we do that is that we don't vote for people who don't have the conviction of their campaign. And we just don't vote crazy, fanatical people in either. We need people that are even keeled, that have common sense, that can disagree without being disagreeable, right? Because now everybody's going to see the puzzle the same way. But if we can all figure out a way to put the pieces together, job done. It's more than one approach to solve a problem. It's just which one is the most feasible at that moment. Which one's going to do the less harm to the people that you're supposedly trying to help, right? Fanatics don't understand that. They just believe in something and come hella high water, no matter how many times it's been disproven. That's their belief and they're sticking to it. That's James Utmeyer. No more of those type of folks. And then we have to vet people that say they're your friend when they're campaigning and really see if their actions match their words. So we won't get another John Fetterman or Joe Manchin or Kirsten Sinema. Again, you don't need to go extreme. And there are some folks that are unfairly called extreme because they have radically different ideas. But if the difference between an extremist and somebody that's radical liberal in thought is that extremists want to tear the system apart. Radicals want to change the system from within, do a whole remodel, right? Keep the shell of the building, but the interior, we're going to move this wall here. We're going to move this wall there. The bathroom should be in the back instead of the front. That's radical thinking. We just want to keep the house, but we're going to rearrange some things in the house, right? We're not going to keep the status quo. Extremists is like tear the whole fucking house down and start over. And right now we have extremists leading us and we got to get them out because they don't care about us. They care about their extreme. They want their agenda. They don't care about you and how that impacts you. They just want to see it come to fruition. That's why Doge was a failure. That's why this latest excursion, as the president refers to it, in Iran is a failure. because you just wanted to do something. You had no plan. It is what it is, ladies and gentlemen. So I just let's be careful. Let's commit to electing American leaders, people who actually give a damn about the country and give a damn about their fellow citizen, and stop voting in these folks that are crazy. All right. That's all I got. Thank y'all for listening. Till next time.
NBG Podcast Network.